It is said that before stories were spoken aloud, they were held in silence. The chapter opens beneath open night, where the earth lies still and the sky presses close. A single slab of stone rests on the ground, its surface worn smooth by centuries of wind and waiting. At first glance, it appears unmarked, ordinary, quiet, forgotten. But as the moon shifts, light glides gently across the stone, and faint lines begin to emerge. They are delicate, patient, almost hesitant. The opening question drifts softly, like breath in cool air. Can stone remember what humans forget? In forgotten corners of the earth, people once believed that memory did not belong only to the mind. It could live in places, in objects, in gestures repeated slowly over time. Stone, above all, was trusted. Breath faded, voices dissolved, parchment burned, but stone endured. Hands once rested here, not hurried hands, not commanding ones, but careful, listening hands. They traced the sky downward, translating what passed overhead into marks that would remain when language failed. Each line was placed not to explain the heavens, but to acknowledge them. The narrative focus settles on the origin of this sky map. It was not a tool of navigation or power. It was an act of devotion. Ancient builders believed the sky spoke constantly, not in words, but in rhythm. The rising and setting of stars, the slow turning of constellations, the return of familiar patterns year after year. Stone was chosen because it did not interrupt. Each carving was a vow, to remember the stars as they were in that moment, not as they might later be named or claimed. No titles were etched, no legends recorded, only position, only relationship. Beneath the silence, the stone feels attentive. Its surface carries arcs, spirals, and intersecting paths that once mirrored the heavens precisely. When moonlight reveals them fully, the stone seems to awaken, not with movement, but with recognition. As the exploration deepens, myth and memory begin to blur. Whispers tell us that the stone was carved only at night. Daylight was considered a distraction. The sky spoke most clearly when the world grew quiet. Under starlight, time loosened its grip. Hours dissolved into patience. Some believe the artisans worked alone. Others imagined small gatherings, silent and reverent, watching the heavens together before any mark was made. No one carved from memory alone. The sky had to be present. Emotion moves gently from curiosity into awe. The listener senses humility and the restraint. Nothing here demands interpretation. Nothing insists on meaning. The stone does not explain the sky. It remembers it. Others whispered that the map was never finished, that some lines end abruptly because the stars themselves would not stay still. Over generations, careful observers noticed subtle shifts. Constellations returned, but not exactly where they had been before. The sky was alive. To complete the map would have been to deny that truth, so the stone was left open-ended. Where memory fades, humility remains. Standing beside the slab, one feels the scale of time press softly inward. Centuries have passed, names have dissolved, languages have folded into silence, and yet when moonlight falls just right, the stone still aligns. The sky above is different now, but not entirely. Enough remains for recognition. The emotional arc deepens into quiet wonder. This was not knowledge meant to be used. It was knowledge meant to be held gently, to witness the sky without claiming it. The stone does not guide travelers. It does not predict futures. It does not warn or promise. It simply keeps a memory alive long enough for someone else to notice. Perhaps that was enough. As night continues, clouds drift across the stars, briefly veiling them. The carvings fade back into obscurity. The stone returns to anonymity. It does not resist this. It does not demand attention. It waits. The chapter moves towards its close beneath starlight, returning slowly. The sky resumes its motion. The constellations glide onward, indifferent and kind. The stone remains still, holding what it can, releasing what it must. Perhaps it was never meant to guide. Perhaps it was never meant to teach. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And some memories survive not by being spoken, but by being allowed to rest in silence. The stone remembers the sky, not as possession, not as prophecy, but as presence. And as sleep approaches, let that thought settle gently, that even when human memory fades, something below still listens to what moves above. The sky moves on, the stone waits. It is said that night leaves marks, even when no one writes. The chapter begins in near darkness, where the horizon dissolves and the world feels unfinished. The desert is quiet, but not empty. Above, the sky is wide and steady, filled with stars that seem to breathe with slow patience. And below, on a plateau of pale stone and sand, a circle waits. Standing stones rise from the earth like paused sentences. They are not tall enough to command, not carved enough to impress. Yet the longer you look, the more deliberate they feel. Their surfaces are worn smooth by time, but faint marks remain. Dots like distant stars, lines like quiet paths. Moonlight drifts across the scene like pale water, and as it does, shadows gather. Long, soft shadows. They stretch from each stone across the sand, meeting other shadows, crossing gently, forming angles that do not belong to chance. For a moment, the ground becomes a map. The opening question settles without urgency. Why draw lines where no one would see them by day? In forgotten corners of the earth, there were people who believed the sky should not be owned. They did not build towers to conquer it. They did not name every star as if naming were control. Instead, they listened. This circle was not built as architecture. It was built as choreography. Each stone was placed to hold a relationship, to mark a pause in the heavens. When a certain star rose, its light would pass through a specific gap. When the moon reached a particular height, shadows would align into crescents along the ground. The map was not carved in one object. It was formed by space itself. And it could only be read slowly. To understand it, one did not stand still. One walked. The stones required movement. You followed the shadow lines from one point to another, learning the sky with your feet. The map was not something you possessed. It was something you experienced. Whispers tell us that the people who came here spoke very little. Their voices felt too sharp beneath such an open sky. They stepped carefully, letting the sand receive their weight without protest. They watched how shadow moved, how it lengthened, curved, and softened. Nothing rushed. The circle taught patience. As the chapter deepens, layers of meaning emerge. The map was not merely for direction. It was for timing. It marked the return of seasons, the shifting of winds, the subtle changes in the sky that only those who waited could notice. One shadow line might mark when planting should begin. Another might signal the night when certain stories were told. Another might lead you to the center, where a flat stone held faint spirals, symbols of cycles, not destinations. Later generations would call such practices primitive. They preferred written calendars, numbered days, fixed measurements. They dismissed the stones as coincidence. Yet the stones remain, and their alignments stay precise, patient, unarguing. Emotion drifts through the listener now, curiosity turning slowly into reverence. There is a quiet beauty in a world that trusted darkness, a world that honored night rather than feared it. Here, night was not an absence of light. It was a time of attention. Where memory fades, rhythm remains. Dawn approaches. The horizon begins to pale. The stars soften, one by one, retreating into the brighter sky. And as light grows, the shadow lines fade. The map disappears. Not abruptly, gently, like a whispered prayer dissolving into morning air. The stones remain, but their message becomes invisible in daylight. This is part of the design. The map does not demand constant recognition. It returns only when night returns, when the world quiets, when the sky becomes readable again. The emotional arc moves into a soft ache. Not sadness, something gentler. A longing for slowness, for a time when knowledge was not kept in books or screens, but in repeated observation and patient presence. The chapter closes as the last shadow line vanishes completely. The ground becomes ordinary again. Sand smooths itself. The stone circle stands silent beneath morning. It has said nothing, and yet it has spoken. Perhaps it was never meant to be found by those who hurry. Perhaps it was never meant to be proven. Perhaps it was never meant to endure in daylight. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some maps appear only when night pauses long enough to be seen. As sleep approaches, imagine the circle still there, quiet stones under quiet sky, waiting for the return of darkness, when shadows will once again draw lines across the earth, and the night will remember how to guide without words.
It is said that some places were built not to look outward, but to receive what fell gently from above. The chapter opens underground, where the earth curves inward and sound loses its edge. A chamber rests beneath layers of stone and time, round and smooth, as if shaped by patience rather than force. Its walls hold no decoration, no inscriptions, no names, only a single opening in the ceiling, perfectly cut, perfectly still. Above it, the night waits. When darkness deepens and the stars settle into their long procession, light begins to fall. Not sunlight, not fire, but something quieter. Starlight descends through the opening, thin and precise, touching the chamber floor like a held breath. The opening question arrives softly. What if the sky was never meant to stay above us? In forgotten corners of the earth, there were those who believed the heavens carried answers, but not answers meant to be seized. To reach upward aggressively was considered arrogance. Instead, they created spaces where the sky could come to them. This chamber was one such place. The builders understood alignment deeply. They watched the sky for generations, noting when certain stars passed directly overhead. Only then was the opening cut. Only then was the chamber completed. Stone was carved to welcome light, not trap it. The narrative settles into this idea gently, but the sky was invited downward,
not captured. When certain stars reached precise positions, their light traced paths across the floor, brief, exact, never repeating in quite the same way. The map here was not permanent, it lived for moments. As the exploration deepens, myth begins to breathe alongside memory. Whispers tell us that people brought questions into the chamber, not spoken questions, but felt ones. They entered in silence and waited. When the light arrived, it moved slowly. It crossed the stone floor, touched certain carvings, illuminated arcs and intersections that were invisible the rest of the night. Then it moved on. No one interpreted aloud. If understanding came, it arrived quietly. If it did not, nothing was forced. The chamber did not promise clarity. It offered presence. Emotion moves inward now, becoming intimate. The listener feels the calm of a place that does not demand answers, a place that accepts uncertainty as sacred. Some believe this was why the chamber left no records. To write down what happened here would have been to diminish it. The experience belonged to the moment alone. Where memory fades, meaning can deepen. The chamber did not belong to priests or rulers. It was not guarded. It did not need protection. Its power lay in its restraint. Without noise, without instruction, without permanence, it resisted misuse. Over time, fewer people came. The sky continued its motion. Alignments shifted. What once felt perfectly no longer did. The light still arrived, but differently, and that was accepted. The chamber was not repaired or altered. To change it would have been to deny the sky's freedom to move. So the place remained as it was, accurate once, then gently outdated, then simply quiet. Emotion drifts toward gentle melancholy, not loss, release. A sense that not all sacred places are meant to last forever. Some complete their purpose and rest. Eventually, the opening gathered dust, the chamber filled with cool darkness. The stars continued overhead, unseen, but the space did not feel empty. It felt finished. As the chapter moves towards its close, clouds pass across the sky above. The last visible stars soften and fade. Dawn begins its slow arrival, washing the heavens into pale blue. Light withdraws. The chamber returns to stillness. Perhaps it was never meant to guide. Perhaps it was never meant to teach. Perhaps it was never meant to endure. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some answers arrive only when we stop demanding them. The chamber rests now beneath the earth, silent, intact, untroubled. The sky continues its endless turning above, and as sleep approaches, let the image remain. A place where stars were once lowered gently into stone, where light touched the earth briefly, and where silence was trusted to hold what could not be named.
It is said that names are the first things to fade. The chapter opens close to stone, so close that texture fills the frame. Weathered carvings rest beneath drifting dust, their edges softened by centuries of wind, touch, and quiet neglect. Spirals, arcs, and points appear and disappear as moonlight moves slowly across the surface. The opening question arrives gently. What remains when words are gone? In forgotten corners of the earth, people once trusted symbols more than language. Words shifted too easily. They bent under power. Symbols, by contrast, asked only to be witnessed. They carried meaning without instruction, allowing understanding to arrive slowly, or not at all. The sky map was filled with such marks. Each symbol once mirrored a pattern overhead. A spiral echoed the slow turning of stars around an unseen center. A crossing arc marked a meeting of paths in the heavens. Points gathered into shapes that once had names, but the names were never carved. The narrative focus settles on this restraint. The builders chose not to inscribe meaning directly. They believed naming could limit what should remain open. A symbol without a name could grow with the observer. It could change without being corrected. As the exploration deepens, the listener senses the deliberate humility behind the carvings. These were not messages meant to be decoded quickly. They were invitations to return, to sit, to look again under different skies. Some believe the symbols were taught through gesture and repetition rather than speech. Children learned them by tracing with fingers, feeling the grooves rather than hearing explanations. Meaning lived in the body, not the tongue. Over time, the gestures were forgotten. Voices changed. Languages dissolved. But the stone remained. Emotion drifts from curiosity into tenderness. There is a quiet ache in seeing marks that once carried shared understanding, now resting alone. Yet there is also peace. The symbols do not seem abandoned. They seem unburdened. Where memory fades, presence can remain. Later visitors came with questions.
Scholars traced the carvings, seeking translation. They compared patterns to known constellations, searching for equivalents. When meaning did not yield itself easily, the symbols were dismissed as decoration. But they were never decoration. They were memory without words. The chapter deepens into reflection. Perhaps the symbols were never meant to survive explanation. Perhaps their purpose was fulfilled the moment they were carved, when sky and stone met through human attention. To insist on naming them now might be to misunderstand them entirely. Emotion softens further, becoming meditative. The listener senses that something gentle was lost when humanity began to demand clarity from everything it encountered. A willingness to sit with not knowing faded. The symbols remain exact in their placement. They have not drifted. They still align with stars that no longer carry their old names. The relationship endures even if language does not. Standing among the ruins, one feels no urgency to understand. The marks do not invite conquest. They invite stillness. As night deepens, moonlight shifts. Some carvings glow briefly, then disappear into shadow again. The experience feels intentional, knowledge revealed only in passing, never held too tightly. Perhaps that is the lesson they carried all along. The chapter closes without translation. No final interpretation arrives. Only stone beneath sky, symbol beneath starlight, meaning resting quietly beyond language. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And some truths survive not by being named, but by being allowed to remain unnamed. Let the symbols rest. Let the silence hold. And as sleep approaches, imagine those carvings still there, patient marks beneath patient stars, waiting not for explanation, but for someone willing to sit beside them without asking for more.
It is said that time once moved without being named. The chapter opens beneath a wide night sky, where the moon hangs low and pale, casting a gentle glow across a flat stone surface. At first, the stone appears bare, unremarkable, quiet. But as moonlight drifts across it, faint markings begin to emerge. They are not numbers, not letters, nothing that can be counted. The opening question settles softly into the dark. How did time exist before it was measured? In forgotten corners of the earth, people once believed that time was not something to be captured. It was something to be followed. They did not break it into units or chase it forward. They listened for its return. This stone was their calendar. It did not mark days. It did not announce years. It waited for the sky. Each carving corresponded not to a date, but to a moment, when the moon reached a certain height, when a familiar star returned to its place, when shadows aligned just so. Time here was cyclical, not linear. Nothing hurried, nothing accumulated. The narrative focus settles on this belief, that the night itself kept order. Moon phases mattered more than hours. The length of shadow mattered more than count. The calendar was not read quickly. It was experienced slowly, over many nights. As the exploration deepens, myth and memory begin to intertwine. Some believed the stone could only be read by those who waited without expectation. If one came searching for answers, the markings remained silent. If one came simply to observe, meaning arrived on its own. Emotion drifts from curiosity into gentle melancholy. The listener senses a world that trusted rhythm over urgency, a world where time was not an enemy to be conquered, but a companion that returned faithfully. Where memory fades, cycles remain. Later cultures brought numbers, they brought precision. They brought the belief that time must be divided in order to be controlled. The night calendar was dismissed as imprecise, inefficient, obsolete. And yet it remained accurate in its own way. The moon still rose, the stars still returned, the stone still aligned. Standing beside it now, beneath a quiet sky, you feel no pressure to understand. The calendar does not ask to be interpreted, it asks only to be noticed. As the night progresses, moonlight shifts. Certain carvings glow briefly, then recede into shadow. Others appear later, patiently waiting their turn. Nothing appears all at once. Time reveals itself gradually. Emotion softens further, becoming restful. The listener senses a relief in not needing to count, in allowing the night to unfold without demand. As dawn approaches, the moon lowers, light thins. The markings fade back into the stone. By morning, the surface appears nearly blank again. The calendar disappears, but it has not failed. It will return when night returns, when the moon remembers its place, when patience allows the sky to speak again. The chapter closes in the quiet between night and day. No answers are offered, no conclusions drawn. Only the sense that time does not require our attention to continue. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some calendars exist not to measure life, but to remind us that it moves on its own. Let the numbers rest, let the night keep its rhythm. And as sleep approaches, imagine that stone still there, waiting beneath the moon, keeping time without counting, patient as the stars themselves.
It is said that not all work is meant to be completed. The chapter opens beneath a wide and patient sky. The stars are sharp tonight, arranged in patterns that feel both familiar and distant. Beneath them rests a slab of stone, weathered, quiet, and unmistakably unfinished. Carved lines trace portions of the surface, careful and precise, yet they stop suddenly, as if the hand that guided them chose to pause. The opening question arrives gently, without accusation. Why would a map meant to remember the sky be left incomplete? In forgotten corners of the earth, there were people who believed that finishing a thing carried responsibility. To complete a map of the heavens was to suggest the heavens had been fully understood. This, they believed, was a kind of arrogance. The sky was still speaking. The narrative focus settles on this belief. The artisans who shaped the sky map watched the stars night after night, carving only what felt certain, leaving the rest untouched. They understood that the heavens were not fixed. Stars drifted slowly over generations. Alignments shifted so gradually they could only be noticed by those who waited their entire lives. Stone endured, but the sky moved. As the exploration deepens, whispers tell us that the map was never abandoned. It was paused. The unfinished lines were not mistakes or interruptions. They were acknowledgments, markers of humility. Where memory fades, restraint remains. Some believed the act of stopping was sacred. The blank stone was not emptiness, it was respect. It left space for change, for future observers, for the unknown. To carve everything would have been to close the conversation between earth and sky. Emotion drifts slowly from curiosity into calm reverence. The listener senses a gentleness in leaving something open. In a world that often demands answers, this stone offers patience instead. Standing beside it now, you feel no urge to complete the lines. The absence feels intentional. The unfinished portions breathe more freely than the carved ones. They hold possibility. The stars above continue their quiet turning. Constellations return, but never exactly where they once were. The map, even if finished, would have been outdated eventually. The builders knew this, so they stopped. The chapter deepens into reflection. Perhaps this was the lesson the stone was meant to teach, that understanding does not require closure, that wisdom can exist without finality. As night progresses, moonlight moves across the slab, revealing the boundary between carved and uncarved stone again and again. Each pass feels deliberate. The eye learns to appreciate what is missing as much as what is present. Emotion softens into restfulness. The listener senses permission to leave questions unanswered, to stop before certainty hardens into rigidity. By dawn, the carvings fade into the pale light. The stone appears almost whole again, its incompleteness hidden. The sky washes clean. Nothing feels unresolved. The math has done its work. Perhaps it was never meant to guide. Perhaps it was never meant to be finished. Perhaps it was meant to remind. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some truths remain alive only when we resist the urge to complete them. The chapter closes beneath a returning night. Stars emerge once more. The unfinished stone waits, calm, accepting, untroubled, content to hold only what it was given. Let the lines rest. Let the blank remain. And as sleep approaches, allow yourself the same kindness, to pause without finishing, to leave space where answers might one day arrive, or might never need to. It is said that the night teaches a different kind of patience. The chapter opens beneath a sky dense with stars. The desert is still, its surface cool and pale beneath moonlight. At the center of the silence rests a stone slab, its surface marked by lines that seem to breathe when the light touches them. Beside the carvings, faint but unmistakable, is the impression of a hand. The opening question drifts softly, without urgency. Who worked here when no one was watching? In forgotten corners of the earth, there were people who believed that daylight carried too much noise. The sun revealed things too quickly, demanded attention, encouraged haste. Night, by contrast, invited stillness. It slowed the body. It softened thought. So they worked only after dark. The narrative focus settles on this quiet devotion. The hands that carved the sky map did not labor under command or ceremony. They came alone, or in small numbers, when the stars were fully present overhead. No witnesses gathered, no records were kept. Stone was touched carefully, as if it might listen. Each mark was placed slowly, guided not by memory alone, but by what could be seen at that moment. If clouds passed, work stopped. If the moon shifted,
hands rested. Nothing was forced. The sky led, the stone followed. As the exploration deepens, whispers suggest that carving by night was a form of humility. In darkness, one could not pretend mastery. The stars towered above, vast and indifferent. Any mark placed beneath them felt provisional, an offering rather than a claim. Emotion drifts gently from curiosity into intimacy. The listener senses the solitude of those nights, the quiet focus, the sound of breath, the scrape of stone, the long pauses between movements. Some believe the hands that worked here did not belong to specialists, but to anyone willing to wait. Knowledge was not assigned, it was practiced. Children traced lines with fingers long before they understood them. Elders carved less as years passed, content to observe. The handprint remains faintly visible, not as a signature, but as a reminder that the map was shaped by presence, not authority. Where memory fades, touch remains. The chapter deepens into reflection. Perhaps this is why no name survived. The work did not belong to individuals, it belonged to the night itself, to the shared understanding that some things should be done quietly, without recognition. As generations passed, fewer hands came. The sky continued its slow turning. The map grew incomplete. But the handprints remained, overlapping, eroding, blending into stone. Emotion softens into calm reverence. The listener senses respect for labor that asked for nothing in return. No legacy, no permanence. Only alignment, briefly achieved. By dawn, the stone appears nearly blank. The handprints fade into texture. The map withdraws from sight. It does not insist on being remembered. The hands are gone now. The stone remains. The sky continues. Perhaps that is enough. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And some work endures not because it was finished, but because it was done with care. As the chapter closes, night deepens once more. Moonlight returns. The carvings reappear. The handprints breathe faintly in shadow. Let the hands rest. Let the stone wait. And as sleep approaches, imagine those quiet nights repeating. Hands moving slowly beneath stars, leaving behind marks that were never meant to be claimed, only felt.
It is said that some knowledge must be protected from being used too well. The chapter opens beneath a quiet night sky. Wind moves slowly across the desert, reshaping the same surface it has touched for centuries. At the center of this motion lies the stone, still visible, still aligned, its faint carvings catching moonlight for the last time. The opening question arrives gently, without urgency. Why would a map meant to watch the heavens be hidden from sight? In forgotten corners of the earth, people once believed that knowledge carried weight. To know something was to hold responsibility for it. The sky map had served its purpose, listening, aligning, witnessing. But the world around it had begun to change. The narrative focus settles on this turning point. The people who tended the map noticed that attention was shifting. Curiosity sharpened into hunger. Observation became desire. Some wanted to use the map not to listen, but to predict, to control, to claim the sky as resource rather than relationship. And so, quietly, a decision was made. There was no destruction, no breaking of stone, no fire. The map was not erased, it was returned. Returned to the earth that had held it patiently all along. As the exploration deepens, the act of burial reveals itself as ritual rather than concealment. Sand was allowed to drift naturally. No tools forced the process. The desert was trusted to do what it always did, move slowly, evenly, without anger. Emotion shifts from curiosity into quiet resolve. The listener senses care behind the act. This was not fear of the sky, it was protection of it. Where memory fades, intention remains. The map was not hidden because it was dangerous, it was hidden because it was powerful in a subtle way. It taught patience, it rewarded waiting. In a world that no longer waited, the lesson risked being lost, or worse, misused. So the stone disappeared gradually. One night it was fully visible. The next, its edges softened beneath sand. Within weeks, only moonlight revealed faint outlines. Within months, nothing remained on the surface. The sky continued unchanged. Emotion deepens into melancholy touched with peace. The listener senses care that something precious was set down gently, not stolen. The map did not resist burial, it accepted it, as if it had always known this moment would come. Standing in the desert now, you feel no urge to dig. The surface feels complete. The sand does not conceal, it protects. Beneath the silence, the stone remains intact. Its carvings are preserved in darkness, untouched by weather or hands. It still remembers the sky, even if no one sees it anymore. Perhaps that was the final alignment, not between stars and stone, but between knowledge and restraint. As the chapter moves towards its close, wind smooths the dunes into sameness. The moon lowers, the stars continue their long paths overhead. Nothing feels lost. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some maps are buried not to be forgotten, but to keep the sky free. Let the sand settle, let the night continue, and as sleep approaches, imagine the map resting beneath the earth, silent, whole, and patient.
having done exactly what it was meant to do, then letting go.
It is said that the sky does not hold still for anyone. The chapter opens upward, where the desert dissolves into darkness, and the heavens spread wide and restless. Stars fill the night in quiet abundance, arranged in patterns that feel familiar, almost trusted. And yet something is different. The longer one looks, the more subtle the change becomes. The opening question drifts softly, without demand. What happens when the heavens refuse to remain as they were? In forgotten corners of the earth, people once believed the stars were fixed, faithful points of reference that returned night after night in perfect agreement. Stone was carved with confidence, alignments were trusted, the sky map was believed to be enduring. But the sky was patient. The narrative focus settles on a truth discovered only over generations. The stars move. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but with a slowness so profound it can only be noticed by those who do not rush. The sky does not repeat itself exactly. It drifts. At first, the differences were barely perceptible. A familiar star rose a fraction lower. A constellation returned slightly late. Most dismissed it as error or imagination. But the stone did not change. The carvings remained precise. And slowly, the agreement loosened. Emotion moves gently from curiosity into awe. The listener senses the humility required to notice such change and to accept it. The map was not wrong, it was honest. It recorded the sky as it once was, not as it promised to remain. Where memory fades, movement continues. Some believed this realization was unsettling. The heavens, once thought eternal and fixed, revealed themselves as alive. The sky was not a ceiling, it was a current, and stone, for all its endurance, could not follow. Rather than correct the map, the builders chose stillness. They did not chase the stars with new carvings. They did not overwrite the old. They watched. Emotion softens into calm acceptance. The listener feels the relief of releasing precision, of understanding that truth does not always require updating. Sometimes it requires honoring what was true once. The sky continued its slow turning. The misalignment grew. The map became a memory rather than a guide, and that was allowed. Standing beneath the night now, one senses the same motion. Stars shift imperceptibly. Time stretches beyond measure. The sky does not wait for agreement. Perhaps this was the final lesson the map offered, that permanence is an illusion, and relationship matters more than accuracy. As the chapter draws toward its close, clouds drift gently across the heavens. Stars soften, then return. The desert remains unmoved. The stone rests beneath sand, no longer attempting to match the sky, but still remembering it. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some truths arrive not through alignment, but through acceptance of change. Let the stars move. Let the stone rest. And as sleep approaches, imagine the heavens continuing their quiet drift, unconcerned with being followed, content to remain in motion, while below, the earth remembers what once aligned, and lets it be enough.
It is said that there comes a moment when watching is no longer required. The chapter opens beneath a sky that feels wider than before. The desert stretches without interruption, its surface smooth and unmarked, shaped only by wind and patience. No stones rise, no carvings catch the light. There is nothing here that announces itself as sacred, and yet the night feels complete. The opening question settles gently, like a final breath. What happens when the heavens no longer need witnesses? In forgotten corners of the earth, people once believed that observation was an act of care. To watch the sky was to honor it. To align stone with stars was to acknowledge relationship. For generations, this belief guided hands, shaped chambers, traced symbols, and taught patience. But the sky was never dependent on attention. The narrative focus turns towards absence. The stones that once mirrored the heavens are gone, buried, eroded, released. The chambers have filled with darkness. The symbols rest beneath layers of earth. The maps have dissolved into silence. And still, the stars rise. Emotion moves slowly from reflection into peace. The listener senses that this ending is not a loss, but a completion. The work of witnessing has finished its course. The sky continues, unchanged by whether it is seen or not. Where memory fades, existence remains. There was a time when watching mattered deeply, when humans needed the sky to orient themselves, to understand season and return. But as knowledge shifted and attention hardened, the relationship changed. The sky did not withdraw.
It simply stopped waiting. This was not abandonment. It was freedom. The stars no longer required alignment to validate their motion. They no longer needed stone to confirm their presence. They had always moved according to rhythms older than observation. Emotion softens further. There is comfort here, in knowing that the universe does not demand participation to continue. That meaning does not collapse when witnesses depart. Standing beneath the sky now, you feel no obligation, no need to remember patterns or trace paths. The night does not ask for understanding. It only exists. Perhaps this was the final wisdom carried by the ancient sky map. That watching is a season, not a duty. That eventually, even devotion must loosen its grip. The sky was never owned by those who studied it. It was never kept alive by attention. It was never dependent on memory. It simply was. As the chapter deepens, the listener may feel a quiet release. The relief of stepping back, of letting the stars belong fully to themselves, of allowing the world to continue without explanation. Clouds drift slowly. Stars appear and disappear behind them. The desert remains still. No moment insists on being remembered. Emotion settles into rest. The sky no longer needs witnesses because it never did. Watching was for the watcher, not the watched. The heavens were patient enough to allow it. Now they continue without concern. The chapter draws towards its close as night thins into early morning. The stars soften. The sky lightens. The desert breathes. Nothing concludes. Nothing resolves. Only continuity remains. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And some truths arrive only when we stop watching and allow the world to be complete without us. Let the sky move on. Let the earth remain quiet. And as sleep arrives gentle and unforced, carry this final thought with you, that even when all witnesses fall silent, the heavens continue, vast, unburdened, and whole.
It is said that memory does not always require agreement. The chapter opens beneath a sky that feels both familiar and distant. The stars are still there, scattered across the darkness in quiet abundance, and yet something has shifted. The patterns no longer settle easily into recognition. The heavens feel subtly rearranged, unchanged in presence, altered in relationship. Below them rests a single stone. It lies where it has always lain, unmoved by centuries of wind and silence. Its surface is worn smooth, its carving softened but still present. When moonlight falls at just the right angle, faint lines emerge, echoes of constellations once traced carefully by patient hands. The opening question arrives gently, without urgency. What happens when memory remains, but confirmation is gone? In forgotten corners of the earth, people once trusted alignment. Stone and sky spoke together. When they matched, meaning felt secure. When they agreed, understanding felt complete. But time continued. The narrative focus settles on this quiet separation. The sky changed, not suddenly, not dramatically, but enough. The slow turning of the heavens carried stars away from their former positions. Generations passed, observers faded. The map no longer aligned, and yet the stone remained. Emotion drifts from curiosity into reflective calm. The listener senses a shift from certainty into acceptance. The stone no longer serves as proof. It no longer verifies the sky. It remembers it. Where memory fades, presence can still endure. The carvings do not attempt to correct themselves. They do not chase the heavens. They hold a moment, a record of relationship rather than accuracy. The sky above no longer confirms them, but neither does it deny them. This was never a failure. It was a transition. Some believed the stone had lost its purpose once alignment faded. Others felt its meaning had simply changed. It no longer taught where to look. It taught how long attention could last. Emotion softens further. The listener senses the dignity of endurance without relevance. The stone does not ask to be updated. It does not mourn its misalignment. It rests in what it remembers. Standing beside it now, one feels no disappointment. There is something gentle in knowing that memory does not require validation to exist, that something can be true once and remain meaningful even when it no longer applies. The sky does not pause to acknowledge the stone. It continues its quiet motion, indifferent and vast. Stars rise and fall beyond recognition, patterns dissolve and reform elsewhere, and still the stone listens. Perhaps this was the final role it was meant to play, not as guide, not as map, but as witness to a relationship that once existed. A reminder that understanding does not have to be permanent to be sincere. As the chapter deepens, night grows thicker. Moonlight shifts, the carvings fade back into anonymity, the stone returns to silence. Emotion settles into peace. The listener feels released from the need for correctness. The world does not collapse when alignment ends. Memory does not fail when relevance fades. The stone remembers the sky alone now. No one checks its accuracy. No one demands explanation. No one asks it to prove anything, and that is enough.
As the chapter draws toward its close, clouds drift gently across the stars, light dims, the desert breathes quietly. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some memories remain true even when nothing confirms them anymore. Let the stone rest, let the sky move on, and as sleep approaches, imagine that quiet endurance. Memory held without audience, truth kept without demand. A single stone beneath a changing sky, remembering what once was and allowing that to be enough.
It is said that silence is not empty. It is simply complete. The chapter opens with almost nothing. A wide desert rests beneath a sky so vast it feels boundless. There are no stones here now, no markings, no chambers or carvings to draw the eye. Only sand shaped gently by wind, and stars suspended in quiet abundance above. The opening question arrives like a final exhale. What remains when even memory has finished its work? In forgotten corners of the earth, people once believed that understanding required effort, observation, alignment, marking. They traced the heavens into stone, listened for patterns, waited for return. For a long time, this was enough. The sky was watched, the earth responded. But watching was never the sky's need. The narrative focus settles into the absence left behind. The stones are gone now, buried, eroded, released. The maps have dissolved into the earth that once held them. The symbols no longer surface, even under moonlight. And yet, the sky remains unchanged. Emotion moves slowly, gently, from reflection into deep peace. The listener senses that nothing has been lost. The silence feels intentional, not imposed, but arrived at naturally, like night following dusk. Where memory fades, presence endures. There was a time when silence felt incomplete without explanation, when quiet demanded interpretation. But that time has passed. The heavens no longer require mirrors below. The earth no longer needs to answer the sky. The relationship has matured into stillness. Stars rise and fall without comment. Clouds drift. The moon waxes and wanes. None of it asks to be recorded. None of it needs agreement. And the silence understands this now. Emotion softens further. The listener feels permission to stop seeking, to rest in what is, rather than what must be known. The silence does not withhold answers. It dissolves the need for them. Perhaps this was the final wisdom hidden in the stone sky map all along, that the deepest understanding arrives when effort ends, when tracing stops, when naming releases, when even memory loosens its hold. The desert does not mourn the stones. The sky does not miss being watched. Nothing is diminished by the absence of witnesses. Standing here, you feel no urge to search. The ground offers no clues. The night offers no instructions. And for the first time, that feels kind. As the chapter deepens, sound thins. Wind quiets. Even thought begins to slow. The stars remain, distant and serene, unconcerned with interpretation. The silence is no longer waiting. It has arrived. This is not forgetting. It is completion. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some truths arrive only when even listening ends. The chapter closes without resolution, without lesson, without conclusion. The sky continues. The earth rests. The silence holds both without effort. And as sleep approaches, soft, inevitable, unforced, allow yourself to join that silence, not to understand, not to remember, but simply to be. The stars will continue, the night will pass, and nothing will be required of you. Let the silence remain whole.